So medical gases. We obviously use medical gases in respiratory care. Mainly, and I'm going to jump down here, mainly therapeutically, providing therapy to patients. You know, every time we give them oxygen, we're providing oxygen therapeutically. It can be used in laboratory testing, especially in what respiratory therapists do. It can be used in the pulmonary function lab. Sometimes we use gases in our ABG lab. We'll get into the specifics a little bit later on how we do that. Gases can also be used for anesthetic purposes and anesthesia. So, let's go ahead and hit every single medical gas we could potentially encounter in respiratory care. Obviously, leading off with the first one, oxygen. So, oxygen, atomic number?
21?
Too high.
14.
Too high. 8, very good. Atomic number 8. Again, I'm not going to ask that question, but as respiratory therapists, I think we should know where oxygen falls on the periodic table. You know, just file that for later. Atomic number 8. All right, so I will go through this. There's some numbers that are going to appear on here that I'm not going to ask you specifically for, but just to compare it to something a little bit later. So, standard temperature pressure dry of oxygen has a density of 1.429 grams per liter. I am never going to ask you that number, so don't worry about trying to stress or write that number. But I'm going to use that number a little bit later to compare the density or weight of oxygen to the weight of another gas, so bear with me there. We know, we've said it before, that oxygen is considered not flammable, but it is combustible. Obviously, a fire is going to be more intense in a higher oxygen-rich environment. Burning speeds increase with increased oxygen percentages, which of course we put patients on higher than 21% oxygen. How is oxygen produced? All right, so how is oxygen produced? One of two ways. The first one, and what we're going to see used in a hospital setting, or what supplies the hospital with oxygen, is this concept known as fractional distillation. That's what supplies the hospital with all of that oxygen. Smaller quantities of oxygen, maybe for a single patient in the home. Physical separating oxygen from regular room air. And we'll talk about both methods here. So fractional distillation, most common method to create oxygen, and it is, compared to the two types, the least expensive. But this is what's used to produce large quantities of oxygen, such as the oxygen we need in a hospital type setting. Oxygen produced this way is 99.5% pure. Right? 99.5% pure oxygen. Atmospheric air is taken in. All the other parts and pieces of atmospheric air are removed, leaving oxygen left. So we remove the nitrogen, we remove the argon, we remove the other trace gases from regular air, and what we're left with is oxygen. God bless you. Now, once we have this pure oxygen, 99.5% pure oxygen, it's going to be stored one of two ways. Either as a gas, that we could put maybe in an oxygen tank. It can be stored as a gas, or it can be stored cryogenically. When you hear that word cryogenically stored, what do you think of? Frozen, cold, absolutely. So oxygen can be stored as a liquid, cryogenically, stored at an extremely cold temperature. We'll get into some of this stuff a little bit later, but I will just kind of give you a helpful hint. Liquid oxygen, when it is stored cryogenically, it's not, and I know we just used the term frozen, it is not frozen, it's not a block of ice, it still remains a liquid, oxygen as a liquid. The temperature is negative 181 degrees Fahrenheit. Would you agree that's pretty cold? Yes, that is pretty cold. Negative 181 degrees Fahrenheit, or something like negative 118 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature that liquid oxygen, and again, I'm emphasizing the word liquid oxygen will be stored. If we allow that temperature to go up, and going from maybe negative 181 Fahrenheit to negative 70 Fahrenheit is still very cold, but that is the temperature increasing, that liquid turns into a gas. So it is stored cryogenically. We'll get into this, I think, in the second part of this, but I'm maybe jumping ahead. In the hospital, if you look outside the hospital, every time I get up onto 295 here to go home and I look back at the Baptist freestanding ER that's here, I can't help but notice their tank just off the building that they store their liquid oxygen in. Every single hospital, every single large hospital is going to have liquid O2 stored in a tank outside. Again, it's stored as a liquid. That liquid will then we'll allow the temperature to rise, that liquid will turn into a gas, and that's what goes through the hospital piped in oxygen that we connect to when we plug in our flow meter, when we plug in our equipment. FDA standards require that oxygen produced this way via fractional distillation is at least 99% pure. Again, it should be 99.5% pure, but FDA standards say it must be 99% pure. So when I say what concentration of oxygen is coming out of that wall, I will round up and call that it's 100. Essentially, it's 100% oxygen coming out of that wall. Now, physical separation. There's two different ways oxygen can be physically separated from the air. One is through molecular sieves. Sieves are like little pellets that can absorb gases, can absorb nitrogen, can absorb some of the trace gases like argon, some of the other gases, water vapor, leaving oxygen only. Now notice it's not quite as effective as fractional distillation. So the concentration of oxygen isn't quite 99.5% pure, but it's 90%, give or take, pure oxygen. That's one way. Another way is a vacuum actually pulls in regular air, which again is 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, argon, some other trace gases, pulls that through a semi-permeable membrane, separating all of the gases, nitrogen, argon, etc., and leaving nothing but oxygen. Now that method's not quite as effective as the molecular sieves. Gases, oxygen coming through this ends up being about 40%, so it's not anywhere near 90% like this one, nor 99.5% like fractional distillation, but it is a means to be able to create oxygen. Now both examples are what we call oxygen concentrators. So an oxygen concentrator, it's a piece of equipment that basically makes its own oxygen. And how does it make oxygen? It takes the regular room air, filters out everything else, leaving oxygen. You may see something like this outside of the hospital setting. So an oxygen concentrator does require electricity to work, does require a power source, so it does have to be plugged into electricity. This will pull in regular atmospheric air, filtering out the nitrogen and all the other gases, leaving nothing but oxygen. God bless you. And so our patient's nasal cannula connect to the flow meter here. We can even attach a bubble humidifier here if necessary. Liter flows for these are not exceptionally high, sometimes only going from 1 maybe up to 5 liters tops. But it's enough to supply a patient some low flow oxygen in a home care setting. Again, what are other areas where patients could require oxygen, but the facility's not big enough to need piped in oxygen like a hospital or a freestanding ER? Nursing homes, maybe even some long-term care facilities that do not have mechanically ventilated patients. They can use something like this, concentrator. Again, provides oxygen to the patients. low concentrations. If a patient's too sick and needs more oxygen, this probably is not gonna be able to supply it. Huh?
So say you have two patients, they're both on 2 liters, one's on an O2 tank and the other one's on a vacuum concentrator. Are they still getting the same FiO2?
Not essentially. We can do our rough estimates and guesses as far as what FiO2, when we may say it's the same, you know, based on our calculations, but if what's coming out of the piece of equipment is only 40% going to that cannula, you have an oxygen tank that is pure oxygen, not nearly 100% pure. I'm gonna say that's probably providing a little bit more oxygen than what the concentrator is providing.
So it's not like a large difference?
Not a significant difference, but if you notice, you've taken a patient from the oxygen tank to this, and their O2 sats start to dip a little bit, probably explains why. Maybe you need to go just a touch higher here to kind of make up for that difference, that they're not receiving quite as much oxygen as what was coming out of that tank.
I was about to ask, but I think you kind of answered it, but so you're saying that the oxygen concentrator won't proportionally give less FiO2 to the same tank, since that's around 40% you said?
Well, depending on which type. This is one with molecular sieves, then that's gonna be up in the 90 percentile. That's gonna be a closer match. Connor was asking about, well, what if it's a vacuum style? Again, what's coming out of here is only really 40%. So that might not quite be as high as, say, something coming out of the tank that is 99.5, nearly 100% pure oxygen. Also, one other thing to note, I'm not gonna ask this yet, but I know I will later. When a patient's wearing oxygen in the home, and they're told, hey, you need to wear your 2-liter nasal cannula. And you know, we're just as bad as anybody else. Well, if 2 liters does a good thing, 3 liters should do better, right? If 1 pill works, well, 2 pills should work better, right? That's the kind of the strategy sometimes. Yeah, I'm not saying I agree with that all the time, but we have to be careful to let our patients know, hey, if the doctor says you need to be on 2 liters, you need to leave it alone and leave it on 2 liters. Now, some patients will think, well, 2 liters is good, 3 liters, 4 liters, 5 liters should be better, right? Well, the higher the liter flow you turn this on, meaning the more oxygen or more gas is coming out of this, the harder this has to work. It's going to try to pull more room air in, and it's going to be harder for it to stay up if the flow is going through here so quickly. And so actually what ends up coming out of here, the faster the flow is, actually less oxygen concentration coming out of this end, the faster the flow, which is the exact opposite of how we would think about in a hospital setting. I'll turn the flow meter on higher, they'll get more oxygen. That's true in a hospital setting. This, it could actually work backwards. So you do have to be mindful of that. Another thing to note with something like this, again, what powers this? Electricity. We've been blessed this hurricane season with no delays or anything like that, but living in Florida, when a storm's approaching, and if my loved one, if my patient, you know, something like that has one of these, and a storm comes by, or even gets close, or even an afternoon thunderstorm, where, you know, certain parts of town sometimes end up losing power more frequently than other parts of town. You know, what happens if the power goes out? What's going to happen to this patient? Well, this isn't going to work. This is not going to be able to supply the oxygen. So in a home care setting, sometimes patients that have this also have some backup tanks, just in case. Just in case. Now those tanks, again, we'll talk about them, aren't going to last forever either. So if, we're going to be out without power an hour or two, okay, no big deal. I can probably run a tank and that'll suffice. But if it's going to be for an extended period of time, or days, again, if the storm was to come through and somebody tries to ride it out, goes, well, okay, I got my backup tank. Again, those tanks aren't going to last forever.
So for a concentrator like that, where you had to actually physically plug into the wall, and you would probably want a really long cannula if they wanted to work around the house.
Yep.
The longer the cannula, does that decrease the
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Now, maybe initially, if I have a 50-foot cannula It is gonna take the gas a little bit of time to get to the end,
But once it
but
gets
once
to the
it's
end,
there,
okay.
it's no problem. But yes, patients in the home, again, in the hospital, we have cannulas that are 6, 8 feet, 7 feet long, enough to go from the wall to the bed, to the chair. I gotta take it off to go to the restroom, but they do make cannula tubing that's much longer, 25 feet, 50 feet. There's extension tubing and little adapters to connect, and, we'll plug and play all the way through the house. And so patients will, perhaps need some longer cannulas in a home situation. But because this can't go very far beyond the electrical cord, if a patient's gonna leave home, go out for the day, yes, they can bring an oxygen cylinder with them and do whatever they need to do, but the patient needs to understand that oxygen tank's not gonna last forever. We'll teach the patients how to calculate how long that tank will last, or give them a general range or an idea that if you run it at this liter flow, this is how long this tank will last you. And so if you're going to a doctor's appointment and then planning on going shopping and then going having lunch, that tank might not last long enough for you this one trip, so you maybe need a second tank. Now tanks, they're heavy, there's some weight to them. Something else that can be used is a portable concentrator. So this is a portable one. You can see, again, patient kind of sling it over their shoulder. Not quite as heavy as trying to lug an oxygen tank around. Now oxygen tanks, of course, will come in wheeled carts to make it easier to transport, but this will make its own oxygen. So if the patient's gonna go out for the day or overnight or for the weekend, and they're not gonna be able to pack this, they can bring a portable oxygen concentrator. Again, it's gonna pull in, make its own O2, and provide it to the patient. Now what powers this? It's not gonna be plugged into the wall, but batteries are gonna power this. So I would always say this for a patient: batteries do die from time to time. Always bring a backup. So you can have one plugged in charging while you're out today, using this for the next several hours. You can come back, switch those batteries, recharge the second one while you plug the fully charged battery into this. And so this is a nice, simple, easy way for the patient to always have oxygen, as opposed to a tank that once it's empty, it's empty. They're gonna have to have somebody come in, take that tank, refill it, and bring it back, or switch out tanks, take your empties and give you some full ones, and that can take time. All right, leaving oxygen, let's talk about medical air. This is regular room air, so colorless, odorless, naturally occurring gas mixture, which contains 20.95% oxygen, that's where we get our 21 number from, 78% nitrogen, and then approximately 1% of the other trace gases. Most of that 1%, what gas is it? Argon. And then there's, they'll touch of helium and some other little touch of CO2, but very, very, very small percentages of those others. Again, density, don't worry, I'm not going to ask this number, but oxygen was about 1.4, this is about 1.2, 1.3 when it comes to weight or density. It is produced, it's medical grade, so it is produced by filtering and compressing regular atmospheric air. If you ever get a chance to see a air concentrator, it looks quite industrial. It does use a piston to sit there and drive in regular room air into it. So when it's attached to maybe our piped in gas sources, it is pushing out 50 psi, pounds per square inch, to supply our equipment. Now I know you guys typically won't notice it. Maybe you'll notice it now that I mention it, but in our lab, we do have piped in oxygen. We have some big giant tanks behind the wall that you can't see, piping in that oxygen, but the room air flow meters, those yellow flow meters, the room air flow meters, are connected to a big giant air compressor that's on the roof. When you're over outside of the area outside the hall and going outside the building where the restrooms are, that stairwell, if you were to take that stairwell up, there's a fence, there's a gate, you can't go any higher, but if you were to go up there, you would actually see it. It's just not far above our lab. And I can't help but notice it when you guys are in their lab doing activities, and you're using the medical grade air, I can hear the compressor on the roof powering up. And it goes through, it'll power up, it'll fill that tank, and then it'll shut down. And you guys will use it, you guys will start bleeding this off, and it knows when the level gets to a certain point, it better kick on again and start filling this up with room air. And I can't help but notice that I can hear that motor kick on upstairs. What's coming out of here should be 50 PSI. What should be coming out of here is that gas at least at 100 liters per minute. That would be enough to supply our ventilators. It's why when we will be doing ventilator labs in there, we can have multiple ventilators running all at the same time. It's enough to support multiple gas connections. What's pictured on the right is a simple air compressor to power a home nebulizer. Now, there's no way this is going to be powerful enough to run a ventilator or anything like that. But it is creating air, compressed air, to power a simple nebulizer. And you guys will see something similar to this this Friday in the lab. All right, carbon dioxide. All right, colorless, odorless, weight of about 1.5, so a little bit heavier than air, a little bit heavier than oxygen, but they're all kind of close, I would say. Does not support combustion, so no worry here of fire or anything like that. And at the same time, does not support life. Be mindful. I can't put somebody on 100% carbon dioxide unless I plan on killing them, right? So does not support combustion, nor does it support life. Well, where do we use this? Well, we could use it in most common uses in the blood gas laboratory, calibration of blood gas analyzers, also in a pulmonary function lab setting. So you will encounter tanks of CO2, and again, recognize, okay, we're not taking these tanks and going and putting patients on pure carbon dioxide. Again, we of course would suffocate someone if we did that. Now, where we could use carbon dioxide therapeutically is in a gas mixture that contains carbon dioxide and oxygen. Carbon dioxide and oxygen. If that's going to be the case, this mixture could contain either 5% carbon dioxide or 7% carbon dioxide, with the remaining percentage oxygen. So if you think about it, if we're using a 5% CO2 mix, that means 5% CO2, 95% oxygen. 7% CO2, 93% oxygen. That gas we call carbogen. Carbogen. You don't see it used very often, but if you come across it, or it's an answer option on the test, you know what it's used for, right? So this is not the gas that we would use in a blood gas lab or in a pulmonary function lab. No, this is a gas we could use therapeutically to treat a patient. Management of syngultus, the fancy word for hiccups. Thank you. All right. Again, anybody ever have the hiccups? You just can't get rid of them. Makes me mad. It frustrates me. Pisses me off. Like, damn it! Stop it! Stop. Of course, you can't control it. But what's some of the strategies or the wives' tales that they say to drink water, sugar under the tongue, hold your breath. When you're holding your breath, what are you doing? You're allowing CO2 to build up. Used to be I don't see too many brown paper bags anymore, but get a brown paper bag and breathe into the bag. What are you rebreathing? CO2, carbon dioxide. So that's kind of the purpose there. Others, during cardiopulmonary bypass, or in certain patients with congenital heart defects, you may see this used. This, however, is a very infrequently used or seen gas. So I wouldn't expect very many of you to encounter this in your travels this semester or even next semester in clinicals. Again, if you did, great, fantastic, but just recognize, boy, that's something you don't see every single day.
Wants to call you when we find it?
Absolutely. There's another one. Let John know. That and the small particle aerosol generator. Let me know when you see it. All right, helium. Why do we use helium? Helium's a odorless, tasteless, non-flammable, chemically and physiologically inert gas. Pretty safe type gas, except the problem, it doesn't support life, right? It's perfect to blow up balloons, and the balloons will float through the air. And why do they float through the air? Because this gas is extremely light. Why I was showing all those other densities for those other gases that I said, don't worry about the number, don't worry about the number. Again, it was 1.4, 1.3, 1.5, 0.1785. Notice how light this gas is. It's the second lightest gas that we have. Anybody know the lightest gas? Lightest gas does start with an H. It's number 1 on the periodic table. Hydrogen. Anybody want to ask a question? Why don't we use hydrogen instead of helium? It's dangerous. It is flammable. Again, the poor folks on the Space Shuttle Challenger back in the 80s, that was from a hydrogen leak, right? Hence the explosion. So we're not going to see hydrogen, but helium, pretty safe gas, with the exception that helium, pure helium, does not support life. Now, yes, I could suck that out of a balloon and make my voice sound funny for a couple of sentences, but I shouldn't be taking that all day or letting my kids sit there and play with the tank that we got for the birthday party and sit there and keep sucking helium, because it doesn't support life. I know I had this conversation with a class one time, and somebody in the middle of the room was like, I could see her face, and she's like, we just had a party last weekend for my daughter, and we were all having a good time with the helium. I say, everybody's probably okay, but I wouldn't recommend doing that quite often, unless you want to, lose some brain cells there. Again, it doesn't support life. Helium alone does not support life, must always be mixed with oxygen. Right, must always be mixed with oxygen. Notice with at least 20%. We can call it 21, but at least 20%. Now, when that gas is mixed, so we don't use helium in respiratory. We don't use helium. But we do use heliox. Heliox is the mixture, the combination of helium mixed with oxygen. That we use. That you will see in the respiratory department. And now that I say that, I'm thinking back. Yeah, in some departments, we do have a tank of helium. And you know what that's for? Birthday parties. Anybody in the hospital that's having a party and needs balloons, they'll go to respiratory and blow up their balloons by using the helium tank. I'm thinking about US Health, because they have one in the corner. And I could help. One day I was there with my students, and somebody says, is it okay? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And they're blowing up balloons. It wasn't the respiratory department, it was one of the other floors, but they knew where to go when they need balloons blown up. But what they were using was not heliox. Okay, that was just pure helium. Same thing, you can go to Walgreens or Walmart and get balloons blown up, Party City, get balloons blown up. Yeah, they have it in helium, okay, not heliox.
There was like a shortage of
There was
helium or
recently, yes. I don't know where that is now. I haven't heard any indications, but yeah, there was concern with the shortage of helium. Could there be a shortage of heliox? Again, part of that heliox is helium. So again, must be mixed with at least 20% oxygen. When we do use heliox, there's really only 2 mixture combinations you will encounter: an 80-20 or a 70-30 mixture. Now what is what? 80% is helium, 20% oxygen. 70% helium, 30% oxygen. If you said, well, could we do a 60-40 mixture? You could, but the effectiveness of a 60-40 mixture, the gas is probably going to be too heavy to use it for what we're going to be using this for. Okay. What is it used for? To manage severe cases of airway obstructions. Now let me be clear. This gas does nothing for the obstruction. Okay? It doesn't make the obstruction go away. It doesn't dilate or open the airway. It has nothing to do specifically with the obstruction. It will do nothing to the obstruction. But we use it, and think about if the airways have an obstruction. So a narrowing. Not a complete blockage, but a narrowing. with those narrowed airways, it may be difficult for oxygen to get through. Alright, may be difficult for oxygen to get through. And so if we can instead provide the oxygen tagged with helium, the heliox mixture, it's a way to get oxygen past the very narrowed airways that are creating this obstruction. And it's simply a means to get what? To get the oxygen down to the alveoli. Why we try to figure out what's causing that severe airway obstruction and then work on treating that. So it's simply a way to get the oxygen down to the alveoli.
That with the landfall, like the lighter gas.
Yep, absolutely.
Greater than diffusion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So lower density decreased work of breathing, making the gas flow more laminar. What I'm going to share here. So if this is what the normal airflow should look like going through the airway, when we have a narrowing, and you can see, well, why is this airway narrowed? Looks like there's inflammation and swelling of the airway, looks like there's mucus, all that. What used to be more laminar flow is now turning all turbulent. Makes it difficult for the gas to get down to where the alveoli are. Giving them heliox can convert some of that turbulent airflow more laminar. Again, it does nothing for the swelling or the mucus or whatever's causing the airway diameter to be so much smaller. It's just simply a way to hopefully get the oxygen down to the alveoli so gas exchange can occur. Meanwhile, like I said, we can then figure out, okay, what's causing the inflammation, what's causing the bronchospasm, what's causing all the secretions, and treat that. Again, heliox, just simply a way to get the oxygen down to the alveoli. Because you could say, well, I'll put the patient on 100% oxygen. Okay, but is it getting down to the alveolus? No, because of the airway obstruction, all the turbulent airflow, no, but let's tag some helium with it and give them heliox. Now, how much oxygen are we providing? 20 or 30%. So I can't give them more than that, because if I do try to give them a higher concentration of oxygen, what happens to the helium? That level goes down and the gas becomes too heavy. And it defeats the purpose of why we're giving heliox in the first place, or using the helium part of heliox in the first place. Now, but again, to be clear, heliox does nothing for the obstruction. The obstruction is still going to be present. You're just trying to buy time to get some oxygen down to the alveoli so gas exchange could at least be occurring. Any questions on heliox? You don't see heliox used every day, but you will see it. It will occur. Who do you think is a patient who's a prime example who may be requiring or needing heliox? An asthmatic patient, not COPD, an asthmatic, not this time. Good guess, good guess. Let's throw COPD out there. It's been the right answer 95% of the time, right? Asthma patients whose airways are constricted and swollen. And again, what are we giving them? We're giving them bronchodilators, we're giving them steroids, trying to open everything up, but right now it's not opening up. The bronchospasm is not reversing, it's not breaking. I've even switched to the continuous bronchodilator. I've been giving this bronchodilator for 8 hours straight. Everything's still constricted. What happens if their O2 sats? They're beginning to fall, beginning to dip. I can try heliox. Heliox can power the nebulizer. It can power their non-rebreather, their oxygen device, to try to get, again, them oxygen down to the alveoli. All right, so that's heliox. Again, heliox is a mixture of helium and oxygen. Nitric oxide. You will see nitric oxide used from time to time. Another colorless, non-flammable, but toxic gas that does support combustion. In combination with regular room air, nitric oxide forms brown fumes of nitrogen dioxide, both strong respiratory irritants that can lead to chemical pneumonitis, a chemical type burn on the lungs, and a fatal form of pulmonary edema. Be careful around this, right? It does carry some significant negatives. Additionally, and we'll get there, what could it cause? Methemoglobinemia. Remember those abnormal hemoglobins we talked about that are not capable of transporting or delivering, carrying oxygen to the tissues? This was the one that looks what color? Dark chocolate brown in color. The blood, I should say, looks dark chocolate brown in color. So inhaling this gas could lead to chemical pneumonitis, fatal form of pulmonary edema, methemoglobinemia. Holy cow, maybe we should stay away from this. So what's its purpose? Mainly used, FDA approved to be used on term or near-term infants with hypoxic respiratory failure. Specifically those who have pulmonary hypertension. What does the word hypertension mean? High blood pressure. But for this, pulmonary hypertension means it's just the pulmonary circulation where the pressure is high. And what causes the pressure to be high? The blood vessels are constricted, narrowed. This gas, if they inhale it, has the potential to dilate the blood vessels, not the airway, not the bronchi. Don't confuse it with a bronchodilator. It can cause vasodilation, the blood vessels to dilate. And it's a very unique medication because it only will allow the pulmonary vasculature to dilate. It won't cause our systemic circulation, the rest of the body, to vasodilate, which is a good thing. We just want to focus on the pulmonary circulation with this. You may hear referred to as inhaled nitric oxide, INO for short, inhaled nitric oxide. Has been used on adults, but the results are inconclusive or mixed. There's some conditions, some disorders and diseases, not COPD, that can lead to pulmonary hypertension, and this gas has been used in those situations, but the results are inconsistent at best. So that's why they're not FDA approved to be used on adults, just term or near-term infants, again with what we term persistent pulmonary hypertension. Medication itself, very, very expensive. There's some alternative medications that are out there. We'll talk about those in due time that are a little less expensive. Sometimes you may see those used instead for this purpose as opposed to inhaled nitric oxide. But for this to work, because it's an inhaled gas, you have to have alveoli that are functional, alveoli that are open. If you have alveoli that are open, then the nitric oxide can get into the bloodstream and cause the blood vessels here to vasodilate. If I have a alveoli that is underventilated, or let's just say completely collapsed, well, guess what's not going to get in there, or very little of it, like pictured, very little of it's going to get in here. It's going to have less, the likelihood of vasodilation here is going to be less likely. So you do need to have inflated, recruited, opened alveoli, because wherever they're open and they're inhaling this gas, it can get to those blood vessels. But we do understand in certain diseases, there could be parts of the lung that are collapsed or well underventilated. If that's the case, those pulmonary capillaries are not going to be dilated because they can't get enough or can't get any inhaled nitric oxide.
If you have like partial atelectasis is not working, but you still get a benefit, like let's say you have like 2 alveoli only.
Sure. Okay, so
But
like pictured here,
yeah, like
so
you're
some-
gonna have a benefit because at least on this one you have more circulated oxygenated
Correct,
flow,
correct,
right?
correct. So even if you have some alveoli that are, like what's pictured here, just 2 alveoli. Here's one that's underventilated, not as much as getting in here. Here's one that is. So this is the part that will be dilated, so we'll hopefully maximize gas exchange here, but understanding this side might not be able to dilate because not enough of that gas is getting in there. But maybe you can make up the difference for where it's lacking by getting some more on that good side. But again, it depends how severe, we're just looking at 2 alveoli, but it depends how many alveoli are truly being affected this way. This is kind of what the unit looks like for someone on inhaled nitric oxide. So it's a completely separate machine. Anybody who's visited some of our hospitals may have walked right past it, not even knowing what it was. But INO, inhaled nitric oxide. Now, not to be confused, so what gas was this? Nitric oxide, not to be confused with nitrous oxide. And you know, when I ask one of the questions, both answer options are gonna be there, right? Nitric, that's the pulmonary vasodilator. Nitrous, that's the stuff you may get at the dentist office. You're having some work done, and you wanted some gas just to kind of take the edge off. They call it laughing gas. I mean, I've had this gas before. I don't remember laughing, but I remember feeling no pain. I remember feeling quite comfortable. I remember having a procedure done, and they said, okay, we're going to get started. Okay, we're going to put this mask on. Breathe normal. Okay. What felt like 3 seconds later, they said, okay, we're done. What? We just started. I don't know how long I was out for, but I was out, but I'm still able to breathe. I didn't go apneic, anything like that. Yeah, best nap I've ever had. But it's used for its anesthetic qualities, kind of the hypnotic qualities, if you will. It's central nervous system depressant effects. Again, too much of it could completely suppress my breathing, and I could go apneic from it, but as long as the dosing is appropriate. Can't support life, must always be mixed with oxygen. Again, nitrous oxide. Now, risks. Long-term exposure lead to neuropathy issues. They've seen links to fetal disorders, spontaneous abortions for folks that have been breathing this. There is a safety standard that its use in a hospital operating room is at 25, that's ppm parts per million. It's kind of a max type dose or a max type amount there. You don't see this really used much in respiratory care, but it is there within the hospital, so it's something we could hear about. And plus, and I'm telling you this right now, it's the perfect distractor answer when I'm asking you to pick nitric, and I give you nitrous, and you have a moment of, it's one of the, am I getting them backwards, okay? So just be careful. Be careful on that one. Nitric versus nitrous. All right, so let's move away from, so those are the medical gases. Those are the medical gases. Obviously, some you see more frequently than others. All right, let's talk about the cylinders. The cylinders themselves that store these medical gases. Now, of course, the one I'm going to talk about most of the time, obviously, is oxygen. We're going to encounter those, essentially every day in some form or fashion. But the cylinders, the gas cylinders, used to store and ship either compressed gas or liquid medical gas. Again, liquid or gas could be stored in some sort of cylinder. The design, manufacture, transport, and use of these cylinders are controlled by industry standards and federal regulations. All regulated by who you probably would not think of. The Department of Transportation, the DOT. The cylinders themselves made of stainless steel, carbon steel, or steel alloy. They're strong, again, hopefully prevent any sort of explosion or rupture of those things. But again, all classified by the United States Department of Transportation. That agency is responsible for the cylinders themselves. They regulate the manufacturing and testing of these cylinders, as well as transport of hazardous materials, including these particular things. I think that makes sense. It's part of transportation. They should regulate. How many times have we been, and you may have never really paid attention before, but you will now, as you're driving down the interstate and there's a truck right next to you with all these tanks, and all these tanks are different colors. Oh, I wonder what's in those things. Well, we're going to know after today. And what happens if those tanks were to fall off the truck? What danger could we be exposed to? Again, like I said, it's probably something you never thought about before. Markings and identifications on the cylinder. Cylinders are color-coded, so they all have their unique coloring system. There are marks stamped onto the side, or what we call the shoulder of the tank themselves. We'll talk about some of those things, or especially the things you're responsible for knowing that are stamped on there. Safety testing of these cylinders should be done every 5 to 10 years to ensure the tanks are still secure, still stable with the gases that are in them. During the test, so these cylinders, these compressed cylinders, there's compressed gas inside these cylinders under extreme pressure, right? That's where the danger and the hazards is. What if this thing was to fall or bust or the top of it shear off? What's going to happen with all that pressure? All that gas is going to try to escape and the tank's going to go taking off on us. So, to ensure during testing that the steel, the alloy that is holding, securing this compressed gas, when they test it to 5/3 their service pressure. So there's a service pressure number, and they actually test it at a much higher pressure. 5/3 it's normal pressure to ensure the tank integrity. And so once it survives that testing, okay, then we know it's good when we put less pressure in there, that tank will hold and not rupture or tear or anything like that. During testing, they're looking for leakage. They're looking for expansion of the cylinder. Any stress on the walls. If they notice that, obviously they will pull that tank, get rid of that tank, dispose of that tank, and give us a fresh tank, a brand new tank. The results of the testing are part of what's stamped on the tank each and every time it goes through testing. There are some of the things that are there on the tank. I'll point out a few. For example, the service pressure. There's the service pressure. This tank is designed to hold 2,015 psi, pounds per square inch of pressure inside of it. A few other things, the elastic expansion, how much that tank moved when it was expanded to 5/3 its service pressure, which comes out to be mathematically 3,360 psi, pounds per square inch. So that was the testing when they were testing it. That's going to be stamped there on the tank. Different retest dates and other codes that the manufacturer is well aware of, and we would have to actually look up in a book to see what some of the other things mean. But I want to point out that surface pressure will be stamped on that cylinder. All right, I did say cylinders are color coded, all right, and it's important. We need to know the color code system. But in addition to knowing the color of the tank indicates what gas is in there. That's just a guide. The color of the tank is a guide. So when I'm walking into the room and I see all these different colored tanks, I know which one I'm going to. But when I do pick up that tank, I absolutely 100% have to read what? The label. And read what the label says. If I'm going in a hospital right now and I'm going to get an oxygen tank, I'm going to the tanks that are colored what? Green. Those are the oxygen tanks. And I pick up that green tank because I need it for a patient transport. I'm still going to look at the tank and make sure the label still says oxygen. All right, so reading the label, most important thing. Color is just a general guide, but I can't trust the color of the tank alone. I must read the label. So there's a lot of gases here. There's a lot of colors, including the United States as well as Canada. Okay? Our tank colors are not internationally standardized. For example, oxygen tank in the United States, it's green. In Canada or every other country, it is white.
We gotta be different.
Well, of course, we gotta be different. We've been different for a long, long time. This is nothing new. Notice in the United States, there is no tank that is white to try to eliminate confusion. Now, things that are white here are usually related to the vacuum, the suction. You know, those things typically are color coded white, but it's not, the vacuum's not a gas. Just like here, nothing else is green. Because they know we're the pain in the asses that have this green tank and we're going to run oxygen with it. So other colors that you need to know. Obviously oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide. I'm not going to ask cyclopropane. That's used in more anesthetic purposes. Helium I will ask. I won't ask ethylene. That's used in sterilization. Notice the combination. Carbon dioxide, oxygen. What was that gas's name? Carbogen.
Carbogen.
Carbogen. So that tank is gonna be gray and green. Why is it gray and green?
Because it's a
Gray,
mixture of both.
because it's CO2, green, because of the oxygen that's inside of it. Helium-oxygen mixture. I'm gonna ask, you're gonna be expected to know that. So that's a combination tank that is brown and green. Why is it brown? Because, I guess, helium, here it is brown. Okay, so when you see a tank that has multiple colors, that's because it's a multiple gas tank. So I will ask about helium. I'm not gonna ask about nitrogen. I will ask air. Please do. Since I'm not asking about nitrogen, I'm not gonna ask about nitrogen-oxygen mixture. But what are the two most often that you're gonna encounter in a hospital setting? Oxygen and air. Oxygen and air. If I had to just pick a third one as far as popularity would go, heliox would probably be the next one on the list as far as what you're gonna see most frequently, most often. I'm not gonna ask any of the international colors. Some of them are the same, some of them are obviously different. Make sure you do know those colors and the colors that I had mentioned, or the gases that I mentioned with their associated color. All right, different size cylinders. There's multiple, there's more than just what's pictured here. Now obviously, the bigger the tank, the more gas it's gonna hold. If I'm speaking oxygen, obviously, if I pick this teeny tiny one, the AA, like a battery, right? Teeny tiny one. AA, that oxygen's not gonna last very long, but if I have an H tank, that's gonna last much longer. There's much more oxygen gonna be in this one than something small. Now, being practical, if I need oxygen and I'm just going to the store and back, it's not practical to expect me to carry this or roll this thing around. This would be much more convenient and easier, but it's not gonna last as long. So it's a catch-22. So sizes E through AA are considered small cylinders, so the E is actually here. The E tank or E cylinder is here. Anything to the right of that are all considered small cylinders. Even though the picture may appear large, that's what you're gonna see in the hospital. That's the tank that's about yay tall, a little past my knee, that we can easily pick up, we can carry, it's not super heavy. We can carry and move it from patient to patient, transport to transport. These larger sizes are more permanent, more stationary, not practical to have to push, pull, drag these things around because they're going to be so heavy in weight. But here's an example. Our hospital is going through some sort of repair of the piped-in oxygen system. And this whole unit, this whole ICU is going to be without piped-in oxygen for the next 6 to 8 hours as facilities works on that line. What can we bring in for all of our patients? You know, we can bring in these big tanks and leave them there in the room. Now this is helping to run my ventilator, and I know this is going to last a good long time, giving the facilities folks time to make the necessary repairs to the piped-in wall system. So you will see these in use from time to time. And again, when it happens, because it's such a large, heavy tank, yeah, it's all hands on deck to get ready to set these things up, making sure every single room has one of these, especially the patients that are on ventilators that are going to need a lot more of this oxygen, as opposed to maybe the patients who just wearing a nasal cannula at 2 liters. Notice the differences too, remote. The top of these tanks, these all have what we call yolks, kind of a valve type stem yoke. These have more threaded connections. Again, to kind of zoom in what you're going to see here. So there's the yoke top for the smaller tanks, starting with E all the way to the right. The larger ones having this type of threaded connection. How do you think you turn this tank on?
Thing up top.
That thing up top, right? You turn that valve. How in the heck do you turn this thing on?
Like a thing on the side.
You would need a key. You would need a key. Now some of them do have their own permanently attached key. It makes it really easy to turn. But if it's one that looks like this, you would need a special key. I can use use a wrench or a pair of pliers and make it work too. But we generally have keys that fit right over the top of it. You turn that, a good quarter turn, you will suddenly hear the gas come spilling out of there. It's going to make you jump. It's going to make people next to you jump, especially if they weren't expecting it. Because again, think about how much pressure is inside these tanks. That's why it makes such a loud, demonstrative noise as you turn it on. And same thing with these. You turn it on, it's going to come blasting out of there very, very fast. All right, they do have, every cylinder does have some sort of safety release valve, allowing some of that gas to vent out if the temperature was to get too high. Again, the higher the temperature, the higher the pressure. And again, these tanks are under pressure, and again, too much pressure could potentially cause the tank to rupture, explode. Now, these relief valves are to hopefully try to prevent that from happening. That if the temperature was to rise, some of that gas can be vented out. Now, what's going to cause it to heat up? What if it was in a fire? You know, what if a tank was in a fire? Again, we don't want it to explode and cause that additional damage or injury to anybody by the tank exploding. So that's why the safety relief valves are there. But I will say, if the temperature gets too high, it might not allow enough gas to escape. Plus, if you think we're in a fire and there's an oxygen tank that's venting what gas? Oxygen that's combustible, it still could explode. Okay, it still could explode. So, yeah, it's great that we have some sort of safety mechanisms here, but if there's a tank and it's in the middle of a fire, I'm going to say, fire rescue's on the way. Okay, I'm going to go the other way and be protected before that tank was to explode or rupture. Filling of these cylinders. All right, so the first one here, compressed gases. So normally filled to its service pressure. Again, that is stamped on the tank. So 2015 is kind of the standard service pressure. But read this second point. They're normally filled to 10% above that surface pressure, which 10% above that 2015 is about 2,200. 2,200 PSI. So when I ask the question, a full tank contains how much pressure? Your answer is going to be 2,200 PSI. Again, even though it says 2015, yeah, but we can actually, it can be filled 10% above that number, which is about 2,200 PSI. Again, it says it right here at the bottom. I forgot I added that. All right, everybody okay with that? So a full cylinder, and it doesn't matter. John, are you asking about the E? Are you asking about the H? The number is going to be the same. Okay, a full cylinder, 2,200 PSI. It doesn't matter the size. That is telling us the pressure. Liquid cylinders are filled according to their filling density, which ultimately relates to the weight of that cylinder. The liquid, so when we do have liquid oxygen, liquid gases, the entire cylinder is not necessarily filled with liquid. At some portion up toward the top, where there's no more liquid, just above that, there will be gas. Okay, so but regarding filling, these are filled to a certain density, or better yet, a certain weight of that liquid gas. All right, so when we're trying to measure how much gas may be inside of that tank, again, if it's a gas-filled cylinder, we're measuring the pressure. If it's a liquid-filled cylinder, we're weighing it. We're not necessarily looking at pressure. Even though there may be a pressure gauge on a liquid cylinder, the pressure doesn't tell us how much is in there. The weight of the cylinder does. The weight of that liquid that's inside that cylinder does. Now, some of you guys that have spent some time with Desmond probably kind of gone over cylinder duration. Yes? Comfortable with it? Those that have had an opportunity to, kind of, again, guess what? Like anything else, there's a formula for that, right? So, to know how long this tank is gonna last. Okay, that's what this calculation is. It doesn't rank in my top 3 as far as my favorite calculations, but it is an important calculation. And trust me, this is a calculation you can teach your patients when they wanna know, well, how long is this thing gonna last me? I plan on going to a doctor's appointment today. I plan on leaving that doctor's appointment, grabbing some lunch with a loved one, visiting for a little bit, and coming home. Will this single tank last? You know, and so, okay, well, how much time do you think you're gonna need to be out? Okay, always have a little extra, have a little play. We know traffic, it may take us so long to get to campus, but when we're stuck in traffic for another 30 minutes, again, that time could be extended. So you always have to kind of count for, don't leave it right up to that second, because what if there's a train? What if there's traffic? What if something prevents you from getting back in the time you thought? So, things we need to know. Things we need to know. It's important. It's important. How long is this thing going to last our patient? We need to know the gas flow. How long are we going to have that gas flowing for? At what speed? At what liter flow? What size tank are we using? Is it an E? Is it the double A? How long is it going to, is it an H? How long will it last? And what's the pressure? Because again, we're talking gas here, gas cylinders. What's the pressure at the start of therapy? And so I would always say, if I want this thing to last the maximum, go ahead and give me let's start with a full tank. Don't give me one that's half full or 3/4 full. If I want it to last as long as possible, let's start with a full tank, full cylinder. So, some of these cylinder factors you have to know. You have to know because you have different size tanks, right? And so we have to make adjustments for the cylinder size themselves. Now let me point out, I gave you a few to look at here. It looks better when I give you a lot more when I can say this. But the only ones I want you to remember that I'm going to test you on is the E and the H. Okay, E and the H. Those are the 2 you need to know. Now, I could have given you that whole list. Remember that whole list of the different tanks? Each one has their own cylinder factor. Okay, but the one I want you guys to know is the E, 0.28, and the H, 3.14.
Thank God it's the same ones that Desmond gave us.
That's right. That's right. Wonder why. All right, so to calculate how long this tank will last. Well, first off, to know how long is this gas going to be flowing, I need to know, well, what's the content? What is in that tank in liters? What is in that tank? And I will simply divide it by whatever I have the liter flow running at. Is it 2 liters? Is it 5 liters? Is it 15 liters? If it's a non-rebreather, I may run that at 15 liters. I'm going to go through that tank really, really quick. Just so you know, a full E-cylinder has a little over 600 liters of gaseous oxygen. A little over 600 liters of gaseous oxygen. An H tank has almost 7,000 liters of gaseous oxygen. Okay? But how did I know it was a little over 600? How did I know it was a little under 7,000? You have to know the pressure. So look at the gauge. How much pressure is in that tank? If it's full, what will the gauge read? 2,200. If it's half full, 1,100. 3/4, whatever the gas pressure is, we're looking that on the gauge itself. Again, the maximum fullest tank could be at 2,200. I'm going to multiply that by the cylinder factor. Okay, cylinder factor. So, and help me here because I didn't do this on math. If I have a full cylinder, 2,200 times 0.28, using the E, what does that number give us? It's like
616.
616. So that's 616 liters of gaseous oxygen. Remember I said it's a little over 600? 616. So I'd simply take that number, pressure times the factor. How many liters is the flow meter going to run? Is it the 2-liter nasal cannula patient? Is it the 15-liter non-rebreather or 15-liter resuscitator? Because we're bagging this patient from the ER up to the ICU, or from the floor where they coded over to the ICU. How long will that single tank last us? Again, I would divide that 616 number, the one we just came up with whatever the flow meter is running at. 2 liters, obviously it's gonna last a good bit. 15 liters, not gonna last very long. Alright, so that's the calculation. I did give you an example, we can do this together. Question is, how long will an E-cylinder last if it has 1500 PSI? So where do we get that from? We read that on the gauge, 1500 PSI, and we're running it at 4 liters per minute. 4 liters per minute. How long will this thing last? When I should have said this already, our answer is gonna be in minutes.
105 minutes.
105 minutes, okay. Second, anybody else get the same? Okay.
We were told you're gonna want it broke down a lot more though.
I don't know, Dan. We just need, time, right? Time. Alright. So that's our calculation, about 105 minutes. So answer to this question is, how long will it last? 105 minutes. Okay, 105 minutes. Not hard, right? But you have to know what? You have to know the factor, right? And which 2 cylinders would I potentially ask you for? An E or an H. An E or an H. And you'd have to know, well, what's the flow meter going to be running at? Are we putting this on the patient's nasal cannula? Are we putting this on the non-rebreather mask, or whatever the flow is? Okay, that would be given to you in the question. I would have to tell you what tank it is so you know what factor to use. But am I going to give you this number? No, I'm not going to give you the factor. You got to know the factor. But I will tell you it's an E cylinder, or I will tell you it's an H cylinder or an H tank. All right, let's talk about another one. What about liquid oxygen? Liquid oxygen. Liquid oxygen, again, stored cryogenically. If we're going to convert that liquid into a gas to be able to provide oxygen to our patient, how long will it last? The calculation has a little extra step to it, but I'm going to kind of jump down. What we're ultimately trying to figure out is how much of this liquid could be a gas in liters, and I'm still going to divide that by the flow rate. And I'm still going to divide it by flow rate. That's what we did on the previous slide. It's to get to this part that tends to be a little bit of another step. A little bit more challenging a step. Not impossible, it's not that difficult, but it's another step. So, I have to know, I should have put this, highlight this, the weight. Not the pressure, but the weight of that liquid oxygen. And so this statement, 1 liter of liquid oxygen weighs 2.5 pounds and produces 860 liters of oxygen in its gaseous state. Okay. Where that is important is the next part of this calculation. To find out how much gaseous oxygen is in this cylinder, I have to know the weight of the gas, right? Weight of that liquid oxygen. So that would be given to you in the question. It weighs X number of pounds. I would then have to multiply that by 860 and divide that ultimate number by 2.5. Now, in case you're wondering, where do those numbers come from? It came from this part of the equation. 1 liter of liquid O2 weighs 2.5 pounds, produces 860 liters of gaseous oxygen. So that's what this part represents. Okay, I'm not going to ask this piece in any sort of question, but it's why you need it for this part of the equation. Once you solve this, so the weight times 860 divided by 2.5, that's going to tell you in liters how much gaseous oxygen you have. That doesn't tell me how long it's going to last, but it tells me how many liters. Then I do just like I did on that previous equation. Take that number, divide it by the liter flow. And we'll do an example together. Go ahead.
So if we were to do this calculation like in the scale, to find out the liquid O2 weight, we would have to know how much the tank itself weighs without any.
Correct. You would have to know the weight. Even though it may give you a pressure means nothing. Not with the liquid O2.
So we're gonna weigh it on a scale?
Yep.
Okay, and then is there a tare?
Here.
Like you would subtract what the tare is of the weight of the actual tank?
You could, but the tank itself, the display may tell you the weight
Okay.
of the liquid that's inside of it. So instead of us having to physically place it on a scale and, I gotta subtract for the apparatus itself, no.
Okay.
It would be displayed there, the weight.
So
Okay.
it's on scale on it? Okay.
Huh.
Just to add, a lot of like personal size liquid oxygen tanks, they have almost like a luggage weigher on them that springs up and down, and it'll show you the weight on that too.
Right, right. Again, not spoiling you, but some of them will even tell you, even the gaseous, they can even tell you how long it's gonna last. We have some fancier ones today that even tells you the time.
That's if you work in a
Makes it-
hospital, they're gonna spring for that.
Makes it easy for the patient. Know what we're gonna see most of the time, especially where we're trying to figure this out, is for the patient in the home. Alright, so here's my question. How long will a tank of liquid oxygen last if it weighs 3 pounds and we're running it at 2 liters per minute? Okay, so it's gonna weigh 3 pounds, and this question weighs 3 pounds, and we're gonna run it at 2 liters per minute. How long will it last? So what do I need to do? Take the weight,
3 times 8.
times 860, divided by 2.5. That's gonna tell me how many liters of gaseous oxygen is present in that 3-pound liquid oxygen tank. Again, when we get to the end, our answer is going to be in minutes. And because it's liquid O2, it's probably going to last a whole lot longer than gaseous O2.
Someone's knocked on the door.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Absolutely, come on in.
Please don't.
Hello everybody, so from 11 to 1 we have hot dogs, chips, sodas, and drinks. If you want to come down after class, can they do that?
Yeah. Where you guys going to be student life?
Right in front of the atrium.
Okay, okay, so down here. Okay,
Yes, sir.
cool.
Come
Thank
down.
you.
Of course.
Thank y'all.
Glad you guys were listening.
Can we do that?
Yeah. And supposedly there's a food truck here today as well. Hibachi? Hibachi?
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to hurry and get this through so we can go have some hibachi or hot dogs or whatever else he said down there. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, but when you say free, okay.
Free hibachi?
Yeah, I didn't say free hibachi. This one? So again, that previous question?
So once we've done that calculation and got that part, then we have to do the step we did before on
Correct.
the other problem,
So-
correct?
So on that previous question, 3 times 860 divided by 2.5 will give us
The
the
amount.
amount of gas, of that liquid that's actually a gas.
And then we have to do the flow rate.
And then you have to divide that by the flow rate. So that last step in this question, divided by 2. Okay?
I'm good. I love how Jeremy opens that bag and then doesn't pass any around.
I'll tell them to.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good question. Faith asked. Now, our answer is gonna be in minutes, right? Answer's gonna be in minutes. So, carrying this out, alright, so 1,032 liters, that's how much of this 3 pounds of liquid oxygen, that's how many liters is in there. That's not time, but I need to know how much is in there so I can divide this number by 2, and that's gonna tell me 516 minutes. So again, the question was, John, your answer gonna be in minutes? Because again, multiple choice test, right? Your answer gonna be in minutes, or could it be in hours and minutes? All the above. All the above. Okay, all the above. Let me go ahead and I'll get to that a little bit more in just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me get to this part. All right, so since this is a constant, right? 860 and 2.5 is always part of it. The only thing that's really changing in this part is the
pounds.
weight. If you were to take 860 and divide it by 2.5, Your number is how much? 344. Here's your shortcut, and I hate saying, here's a shortcut in first semester, but here it is. You can because that's a constant. And when you divide 860 and 2.5, you end up with 344. You can simply take the weight and multiply that by 344.
Well, that's bad.
You know what your answer is going to be?
It's the same.
The same. So maybe that's a good shortcut. Lessens a step at least of having to remember two numbers. If you can just remember, just multiply it by 344. Of course, first semester we can't go over all the shortcuts just yet. And trust me, for some of the things we've discussed already, there are some shortcuts for those, but I can't share the shortcuts. Too many shortcuts in the beginning. Oh man. Oh, man. That's right. That's right. We'll hold it back just a little. That's really lame. You should hear the second year students go, don't teach them that shortcut yet, John. Don't teach them that. We had to learn it too.
Okay, tomato for them.
I'm going to remember this a year from now when you're telling me, yeah, don't tell the class that's following after you guys. Don't teach them that shortcut.
No, I want everybody to be successful. You better tell them.
All right, so our answer here, everybody okay where 516 came from? Again, shortcut version, the weight times 344 equals this. That's how many liters of gaseous oxygen is in this 3-pound liquid tank. Take that number, divide it by whatever the liter flow is. You know, in this example, I just made it 2 liters, which means this is going to last a long time, right? If you wanted to know what this is in hours, what should you do?
Divided by 60.
Divided by 60. That's going to tell you how many hours this thing would last. Divide it by 60. All right, so that's kind of a final step if you wanted this to read hours. You know, and how many hours would this thing last? Or even the previous example we had, Here, how many hours is that going to be? Well, I can divide that by 60. And that'll tell me how many hours this would be as well. All right, that was my last slide, right? Okay. So, a few questions. We'll do these questions, kind of wrap up. So, first question is, heliox would be found in what color tank? Would it be gray, a tank that's gray and green, a tank that's green, a tank that's green and brown, or a tank that's brown? Heliox. Better be green and brown. If you said brown, what's in a brown tank? Helium. If you said green tank only, that's what? Oxygen. But heliox is a combination of helium and oxygen. So green and brown. Correct answer to this question. So this one's D. Next question. What special therapeutic gas would be recommended for use in treatment of term and near-term infants with hypoxic respiratory failure? Is that heliox, nitrous oxide, carbogen, or nitric oxide? Nitric oxide. This one is D, nitric.
Yes. We didn't, that was not on the list because it has its own tank. That's
Correct.
right?
Correct. Nitric, yes. And right now, there's only one manufacturer that produces the nitric oxide, so they kind of have a monopoly on the system. Probably why it's so expensive.
I need to get in on that.
There you go, there you go. Research who makes nitric oxide. Yeah, but watch, the second you get into it, now suddenly there's a generic version and everybody else can make it, and then those shares go dramatically down. All right, so this one's nitric oxide. What special therapeutic gas would be recommended for use in the treatment of oxygenation problems due to an airway obstruction? Heliox, nitrous oxide, carbogen, or nitric? This one's heliox. And again, does it do anything for the obstruction? No. It's simply a way to help get oxygen past the obstruction. So I think we use asthma as an example. I've used heliox on a patient before who had a cancerous tumor in the airway. And we were waiting for that patient to go to surgery to have that tumor removed. So his airway was yay big, but this tumor, this mass, was really obstructing his airway. And he was having trouble oxygenating. And so we had him on heliox to at least get oxygen past that obstruction area until, they can take out that tumor in the OR. All right, next question. What is the duration of flow for an E-cylinder with 1500 PSI that is running at 5 liters per minute? I know you're gonna have to figure that out here, so go ahead and do that calculation. Tell me what your answer is. You hearing E? You hearing C? You hearing both? So when you get your answer, what's the answer? Okay, so answer is 84 what? So did you see what I did here? If we didn't do this in here, how many would I have tripped up when you were taking the test and picked this because it says 84? Again, that's 84 minutes, not 84 hours, right? 84 minutes. So, I didn't give you 84 minutes as an answer option. Damn it, John. So how do I convert this to minutes? Well,
Divide by 6.
first off, how many minutes in an hour?
60.
Okay. Take off 60, what are you left with? 24. So 1 hour and 24 minutes. I think that's easy to see because this is not a very lengthy period of time, right? If you wanted it to look right on the calculator, I would divide this by 60, and what's my answer? 1.4. What is that? 1.4 hours. All right? It's why C is also a correct answer here. So when I ask this question on the test, look how many different variety of answer options I can give you.
And you would take both of those?
Hours and minutes. Both answers, C
Okay.
or E, would be correct here.
If they're both of them as the answer, can I get double credit?
No. All right, so if you have an answer that is in hours and parts of an hour, okay? Now, for this example, it's easy to see because it's a short period of time. You know the answer here, and let's not use these as an example. You know the answer is going to be an hour and a part of an hour. If you're curious, well, how do I get this part of an hour? You can take that point number and multiply it by 60. What are you left with? 24. 1 hour and 24 minutes. Okay? On this one, I think it's easy to see because we know it's 84 minutes. Just subtract 60 from that. There's your 1 hour, and what you're left with is 24. There's your 24 minutes. Everybody okay where I was doing here? So going back to your question, Faith, what are you going to give us? Who knows? Who knows? One question, I give you all the answer options in minutes. Another question, I give you answer options in hours and minutes. I didn't say that, but well said. Right? Just because it's fun to do.
On the test, do you have like two answers that were right?
I would
Did
not.
you do that?
I would. Not intentionally.
Okay.
Has it ever happened before? Yes. And as you're taking the test, and it's funny, I'm not laughing at you, I'm kind of laughing at the
You are.
situation.
Yeah.
No, I'm not laughing. I was in your shoes once too, and I feel your pain. But I've done that before unintentionally, and I see students looking down at the test, and they look up at me, they look down at the test, they punch in more in the calculator, they're scratching their head, they're trying to, one of those answers has to be right, and one of them's wrong. And really, both answers were right, and I unintentionally did that to them. And so they're battling in their brain that one of these answers is correct when really they were both correct. I have done that before unintentionally, but I wouldn't do it on purpose. But if it happens, it happens. Go with the best answer. And you guys know, some of you guys are well versed at it by now. If you're not sure, raise your hand, ask me a question. I'm not going to give you the answer, but maybe something like that, I'll let, you're probably pretty good either way. You know, I would say something like that if I recognize that, oops, I gave you the correct answer twice. Like here, I did. You know, C or D. Alright, I forgot I put that on there. Alright, so the answer is in minutes, answer is in minutes. Last question, how long will a tank of liquid oxygen last if it currently weighs 1.5 pounds and will be running at, it will be running a 2 liter per minute nasal cannula. And you can use the shortcut method if you want. Wait times 344 will give you the amount in liters, and then take that amount divided by the liter flow. Come up with something, kinda, whether it's right or wrong, come up with something. Alright, so, our answer here, whether I take 1.5 times 344, should be 516, or whether I do the long version, 1.5 times 860 divided by 2.5, still 516. That means there's 516 liters of gaseous oxygen in that tank. What do I then do with that 516 number? Divided by 2. So divided by 2, answer should equal 258 minutes. I didn't give you an answer in minutes. That's not the right answer, is it? No, but I'll sucker somebody into picking that one, because you did all the hard work. You got to here. You did the hard part. You just look at this and go, I don't know, throw an answer there. No, that's not it. But you understand where I got those numbers from, right?
Take more time making the wrong answer than the right.
4 hours.
That's the fun I have. That's a little bit of fun I get to have in my day. Alright, so if our answer is 258 minutes, how many hours is that?
4 hours.
What do I do with this?
Divided by 60.
And what do I get?
4.3.
4.3?
Oh, no.
Did anybody want to pick this one? Did anybody want to pick this one? Alright, no, because 0.3 of an hour is not half an hour.
It
If my
just said
answer was
5.
4.5, then that would be 3.5 hours, but my answer was 4.3. How do I make that 0.3 of an hour into minutes?
Times.
Times or divided?
Times.
There's your minutes.
Wait, why'd we times it?
Because you're trying to figure how much of an hour, how many minutes of 0.3 of an hour is it?
Oh, okay.
So multiply it by 60. There's your 18. So the right answer is C, 4 hours and 18 minutes. I get folks with these type of questions all the time in this when you're calculating.
Say it ain't so.
I know Desmond was dropping some hints for you guys that he was teaching this to. The answer's in minutes, but I know what he told you. John's going to make you have to answer it in hours and minutes. But it's because I can get you so trapped into picking some of these others because those are the numbers you're seeing appear on your calculator. Right? Just be confident. Your answer's in minutes. When you divide it by 60, your answer now is in hours. Hours. Alright, so what if the answer options, there was only one answer that was 4 hours and some minutes? I don't need to worry about doing this part, because I know the answer is going to be 4 hours and something. If there was only one answer that was 4 hours, well then that has to be the right answer. So even if I got here, and I didn't know the rest of it, at least I could eliminate these as being possible right answers. It's 4 hours and something. Right? 4 hours and something.
Cause you see how he didn't really go into it until we started doing these questions.
That's right, that's right. Can't give it all away, not too fast.
Was that one of your students?
He was, many moons ago, many moons ago.
Don't tell us how long ago.
Yeah, I'm not,
Didn't you say you've been here like 20 years?
something like that.
He's like, I like it.
Or it was something to be proud of, and I was like, damn, that makes me feel old.
I'd be proud of it too.
Alright, no, I think I got a thing on my badge. Last year, this is 25.
Dang.
Yeah, I'm like,
That retirement
yeah,
gonna be nice.
way too much. Yeah, it was weird working with the people that taught me, when I started many moons ago. And they've all since made their way into retirement, and it's like, holy crap, I'm getting into that same level now, so.
Was that one
Scary.
of your best students in that class, or was he one of the?
I'm not turning on Des like that. Well, the reason I knew who he
Must
was.
have been halfway
obviously,
decent
so was
'cause
a
he's here.
reason I wanted him to teach here. But yeah, as a matter of fact, I will say this, and it's nothing about Desmond. His class, from his class, including Desmond, 3 members of his class have taught for me here before, at one point or another. So just show something about that class in particular, that 3 members of that class have, came back to teach here at one point or another. That's interesting. All right, why don't we, it's 11:03 right now. That was my last question. So why don't we take a break?